Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am Jamie Graham, and I serve as an instructional coach for the University of North Carolina at Pembroke's New Teacher Support Program. And with us today for this presentation is Lisa Becker and Heather House. If you guys want to wave and say hello. Before we turn things over to them, I'd just like to share with you a few logistics. This session will be recorded, and at the close of the symposium, we will gather the recordings, edit them, and we will add the link to the website that you were provided so you can later access any of the sessions that you were unable to attend. On the screen, you see the link to the actual website. And then I also want to remind you, as you are engaging in conversations and professional growth in each of the sessions, please, if you are interested in using Twitter handle hashtag LearnGrowLead20, please do so that you'll be eligible for a possible prize at the end based on the number of tweets. So, and we want to encourage you to do that to help to lead others to this session at a later date if they are interested in doing so. Okay. And then if we can go to that next slide, just virtual norms, please make sure that your microphone is muted. I noticed that we have a call-in user, and I'm unable to mute you from my end, so I'll just take just a moment and pause. You can just use the mute button on your actual dial pad on your phone. If you could go ahead and do that for us, then the sound would increase. So we want you to be actively present, participate in any virtual activities, and of course, be vulnerable. We're all in a new normal now, and learning experiences are very valuable to all of us as educators. I will be monitoring the chat feature for our presenters to help them to be able to stay focused on their content delivery. And so if there's anything that you would like to add to help support the flow of the content, or if you have any questions or concerns, I'll be monitoring that to help support you as a participant today. Okay, so at this point, I'll just share with you that Lisa Becker and Heather House both come from the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program out of the ECU program, and Lisa and Heather both have a lot of experience in education. Lisa comes from of elementary focused instruction, and this is her third year with the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program. And Heather began her teaching career in 2005 as a middle school teacher. So we have a good representation of that vertical alignment and support for that. Their session today is creating and sustaining effective professional learning community. So, ladies, we are very appreciative of your time with us, and I'll turn things over to you all, and we look forward to learning from you today.
Thank you, Jamie. We are excited to be here today. Like Jamie said, we are out of the East Carolina region. My name is Heather House, and Lisa is here with us also. And just excited to be here representing the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program and our region in East Carolina. Today, as Jamie said, we're going to talk about professional learning communities. And here are the 4 things that we hope that you can gain today, at least focus on 1 or 2. We want you to understand what a professional learning community is and its purpose, how to create and sustain an effective PLC, and we will refer to the professional learning community as a PLC from this point forward. And identify the cycle of learning that it is necessary to have an effective PLC, as well as looking at the structure of an effective PLC. So if you could just look at those and pick one that you could focus on today, hopefully you can gain something even if you are familiar with PLCs. Anytime that we do a presentation, we align them to the North Carolina Professional Teaching Standards, and we're hitting several of those today. Standard 1, teachers demonstrate leadership in the school. Anytime you're a part of a PLC and you're an active participant, whether you're leading or whatever role you play, standard 1, it's a leadership component to go above and beyond just teaching inside the four walls of your classroom. Standard 4, facilitate learning for their students. We have to work together in a professional learning community to plan the appropriate instruction for your students. And there's people around us that can help with that. And then standard 5, reflecting on your practice. Anytime that you go back and look at what you've already taught and readjust and redeliver it, that's a reflection of your practice as well. So today we have this document. If you go to bit.ly/1 and a capital UNCP, you will come to this document. If you'll notice on here, there's 3 circles and then I guess a starburst. I don't know what to call that there. Those are the only things that are clickable on the screen. As we go through the presentation today, they will go in order, and you don't have to click on them until we actually get to that point. But that way you don't have to type in all the bit.lys as we go. If you have this up, you can simply click on the link. So we will work from that today. Okay, I think Jamie has put that in the chat, so I'm gonna move forward. All right, before we get started, we want to look at the what and the why. So we're gonna have you either click on the link, the what and why link, it'll take you to this bit.ly, or you can simply type this bit.ly in, whichever is easier for you. And based on your experience as a teacher so far, how do you define a PLC and what is its purpose? So when you click on that link or you go to the bit.ly, you will come to what is known as a Jamboard. A Jamboard, and as we use strategies today, we always like to explain them, so you may want to use them in your classroom if you're unfamiliar with them. The Jamboard is just basically a whiteboard features that allows you to do multiple things. On the side, it'll allow you to use a pen or eraser. But today we are using sticky notes. So if you will please click on the sticky note, pick any color you would like, and answer the question on your sticky note. Once you write your answer, it will appear on our board. Okay, and you can move it wherever you would like. So if you will, pick a sticky note, any color you'd like, and tell us how you would define a PLC and what its purpose is. I'm going to take about, let's say, 2 minutes for you to do that. And again, the bit.ly is in the chat. And take about 30 more seconds. All right, so let's take a minute to look at these. These are all really, really good. So it's time to look at data from various assessments. Collaboration, awesome. A professional network of teachers who are striving to improve their practice and increase student achievement, working together to plan lessons, job embedded professional learning as a team to support a common understanding of support for increased student learning. So we all have a great idea of the purpose of a PLC and what it is. We're going to take a look at what we're going to take a look at what DeFore says a PLC is. An ongoing process in which educators work collaboratively in recurring cycles of collective inquiry and action research to achieve better results for the students they serve. So that's a mouthful. Okay, so I want you to take a second and either write in the chat or you can even unmute and tell me what words stand out in DeFore's definition of what a PLC is. I see one word that somebody put on the Jamboard that stands out to me. If you could put in the chat or even open your mic and tell me what words stand out here.
Heather, I will say, just to kind of get the conversation going, that the word that stands out to me is cycles.
Okay, cycles is collective inquiry. Anybody else? I know somebody sees the word collaboratively because they wrote it on the Jamboard for collaboration. Action research. Okay, you are welcome to keep typing. We are going to go ahead one slide. So the words that stood out to us are starting in the beginning, an ongoing process. So to me, what this tells me is that a PLC never ends. So it's ongoing, it's week after week, month after month, year after year. It's a process. So the educators work collaboratively. So we're not working in isolation and we're in recurring cycles. So recurring cycles, if you look up the definition of recurring, it's happening over and over and over again, just like an ongoing process. And it is a cycle, and we're going to get to the cycle that we use. Collective inquiry. So when we look at inquiry alone can stand alone, but the word collective in front of it means lots of pieces are coming together. Same thing with research. We can all do research, but action research takes it a step further. So there's actually something happening in the research. It's in real time. And that we're doing all of that for the students to achieve better results for the students that we serve. So that is what a PLC is. We are working together with an ongoing and recurring process to have collective inquiry and action research. And the ultimate purpose is to achieve better results for the students we serve. That's the purpose of every teacher, I believe. And so if we look further, we want to know what makes that PLC effective. And we've looked at oodles and oodles of research, and it all boils down to collaboration, not working in isolation. And collaboration, to co-labor, to work together. So it's a systematic process, again, in which we work together. Interdependently, we analyze and impact professional practice in order to improve our individual and collective results. So again, if we're working together, not in isolation, we're having collective results. So everybody is benefiting from collaboration. And being committed to working together to achieve a collective purpose. Again, it's collective. It takes it one step further. So we're not working in isolation. And collaboration, and that's a word, that's a buzzword that we hear all the time. But at the end of the day, we're working smarter and not harder. So if everybody is working together for a common purpose, we are saving time, we're saving energy, and we're bringing all our thoughts together. We can all do better working together. Okay. Creating an effective PLC. So if you are in a building that doesn't currently have PLCs, or And we're going to talk about this towards the end. Some people have PLCs, but they're more like team meetings. So having an effective PLC, here are 4 things that are really important to creating an effective PLC. To start, to set clear norms. Norms are things, uh, for lack of a better word, they're rules, the rules that we follow, but we don't assign the rules. The norms are created together. So just like when we started at the beginning of this presentation, like mute your mic. So they're things that they need to happen for a reason. So if we didn't all have our mics muted right now, there'd be a lot of background noise. So norms are typically created together as the PLC group, and they're things that make your group succeed and work better. Assign roles such as a timekeeper. Just like Jamie is the host and she's monitoring the chat, it's hard for me to present, monitor the chat, keep up with the time, so we assign roles. And defining expectations. What do we expect to get out of this group? What is our purpose even in having this professional learning community? Are we a team of 5th grade teachers? Or are we a team of high school science teachers? What are the expectations for this group? And then creating a clear structure. And I put a sample agenda that was one of the best that we could find, that had an agenda and a space for meeting notes. And that is also linked in the bit.ly that we gave you down here, so you have access to it for the sample agenda. I will click on that in just a second and come back to that. But having a structure such as that that you use as a part of your weekly or however often you have your PLC will keep you focused and keep all people engaged. And then what's coming next is the teaching and learning cycle. So as long as you follow the teaching and learning cycle, you're going to have an effective PLC. That is that recurring cycle that we've referred to over and over again. And last but not least, you've already heard me say, to work smarter and not harder. So if we all work in isolation, I'm working on lesson plans for my 4th grade English class. Lisa's working on lesson plans for her 4th grade English class. Yes, we're going to take it back and we may deliver it totally different. But if we're planning together and we're looking at student data and we're doing all of that together, we are not working nearly as hard, and we're collaborating together to use each other's experience and expertise to come together. I'm sorry, let me go back to that. The sample agenda, I'm going to click on it from here. This is agenda from another county. I think it's even from another state, but it has everything that you would need to have a structure for your PLC. So it even goes as much as to the materials that you need to bring to the meeting, the PLC members. And we said your structure, your expectations. What's the goal of today's meeting? So if we're having a PLC, what are we doing? What is our goal before we get to the end of this meeting? And if you'll notice at the right side, they have norms that I would assume that their group came up with together. Start and end on time, respect the time, you know, just the norms that this group of people created together. And then they have an agenda that was not this is just a blank one. It could be pre-established or not, but what do we need to discuss? Who's doing the talking and how much time do we need for that to take? And then there's a place for notes. So you would have somebody in the role of note taker and they would type in the minutes as we met. Then as you come down, they even have expectations for the agenda and the minutes, who they should be given to, where it should be typed, how often. And then they have questions that guide their work from DeFore, which is just another scholar that is responsible for a lot of the work done for professional learning communities that we have referred to already today. And here are questions that, as I pass on the ball to Lisa in just a second, that she is going to take us through and what really makes a PLC work and what makes it effective. So we're going to go back and move forward and look at the structure of an effective PLC.
Thanks, Heather. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so we're going to switch over to the structure of an effective PLC, and that structure is what you see in the middle of the screen, the teaching and learning cycle. So you might hear of this as the teaching cycle. You might also hear about this as the learning cycle, but they're one and the same. And like Heather discussed earlier, this is a cycle. It is ongoing. It's not left to right and there's a clear, end point. It is a circle and we keep on trucking. We're never ending. So we're going to go through each one of these pieces of the cycle, and we'll start at the top with planning. So when you are in your PLC, you want to plan your lessons for your students. And the question that's going to drive that, which is at the bottom of the that sample agenda that Heather just shared, the question that can drive that in your PLC is, what are we expecting them to learn? And that is coming directly from our standards and what we need to deliver to our students. So as we go through this, we're going to go back to our classroom, if you will, and in that Bitly under structure, thank you. We have a Padlet, so we're going to be hopping back and forth between the slide, and you can have this Padlet pulled up. We have each of the learning cycles posted on that Padlet. So as you see under plan, that guiding question, what is it that we expect them to learn? So we're going to be popping back to that Padlet and hopefully having you add some things. So like I said, with planning, what do we expect them to learn? That common curriculum. We have to decide, what does this standard say and what do I want my students to learn from this? Most districts, we have that common pacing. So making sure that everybody on that team is together, is close in that pacing. Yes, we have different learners in our classrooms, and so my class might need another extra day, versus Heather's class. She might have gotten it and they can move on. But in general, you want to have that common pacing. When we're planning, we want to unpack those standards, and that comes from DPI. We have that those resources available to us to say, what do we expect them to learn? What does this really mean? So we go to that unpacking standard to make sure that we really understand what our students are supposed to be learning. Obviously, as we plan, we want to plan tasks for our students, and those quick formative assessments, those quick checks to make sure that they are understanding what we expect them to learn. Obviously, we need to plan for varied learning needs of our students, and that's not just our EC students or our struggling students, but looking at the needs of all students. So our AIG students, what is something else that I need to do for them? And obviously in our PLCs, we want to discuss strategies for learning. So how are we going to be presenting this information? So if we can go back to that Padlet. So underneath plan, if you would, we'll take just a minute or two. And when you're in Padlet, you have the plus sign underneath. And if you click on that, it will pull up almost like a little sticky note where you can type in. So just want to invite you right now to share what you have done in your PLCs, or what you have a thought of when you are going to be involved in a PLC later on in the school year. What do you want to bring to your planning session? What will you use in your planning session to help answer that question? What is it that we expect them to learn? Okay. So we have some great things here. We want to ensure that we unpack the standards and develop a criteria for success. I think that is fantastic. I obviously love the unpacking the standards, but having that criteria for success is key. So just like at the beginning of our PLC, we want to start with what our outcomes are. We want to do that for our planning session for our students. What is the criteria for success? So just like we do it at the beginning of our PLC, we want to do it at the beginning of our lesson plans. We also want to bring any of our standards documents, like somebody just mentioned, our unpacking documents, and tasks from DPI. So a DPI offers some information, tons of information that can help guide us in our planning. So when you are sitting down in a PLC, bring those up. Just like that materials on the agenda had materials to bring at the top, go ahead and identify who's going to bring the unpacking document, who's going to bring a task from the tools for teachers in the math that they offer. So these are great things, and just want to make sure that those items are already determined and we know who's going to bring those, and that's going to help to answer that question. What is it that we expect them to learn? Now, this next piece of that cycle is teaching. And so the question that we want to use to drive that is, what strategies will we use to ensure that this student learning is engaging? So this is where having that team to plan is going to be so beneficial. We said we want to work harder. We want to work smarter, not harder. And with a PLC, you have a wealth of knowledge. If you are a first-year teacher, you have ideas you've gone through in your practicums and with your internship. If you're a teacher who's been teaching for 20 years, you have ideas and you know what has worked and what has not worked for your students. So coming together in a PLC with all types of with ideas and strategies is going to do nothing but ease the workload and help our students. So using that guiding question, what strategies will we learn? What strategies will we use? We're going to talk about building their background knowledge and making what we're teaching relevant to our students. Obviously, we want to engage them in learning. We know if our students are not engaged, then they are not going to pick up on what we are teaching at all. So we've got to hook them. We obviously want to scaffold our learning for our students, making sure that we are building up that knowledge and so that they are able to learn what we are teaching them. We want to have higher order thinking questions, and those are things, that's another piece that can be in that materials that you bring to your PLC. Who's going to bring some higher order thinking? Who's going to bring question stems? So that's something else that you can add to that PLC document where you're not responsible for it all. We're relying on our colleagues, relying on each other. With our teaching, we want to use collaboration. We want to use small groups. We want to make sure that our students are accountable when they're talking and utilizing those small groups. We want to offer student supports. And what's really hard, we know as teachers, we have to adapt quickly on a dime. If this isn't working, we've got to pick up that on the faces of our students, and we've got to switch it really quickly. So that last one, that adaptation in real time, that's tough. But we know that when we're in our PLC, we can talk about, hey, if they're not going to get this, or what has a strategy that you've used worked. And so that's when you can rely on the others in your PLC. So if we want to go back to that Padlet, and just as you did under plan, under teach, if you would hit that plus sign and add some strategies that you have used that you've ensured that the learning for your students is engaging, or what are some things that you have an idea of that you'd like to use in the coming year. So if you would, underneath the teach heading, if you'll hit that plus and just add some strategies that you would like to use to make sure that that learning is engaging for your students. Create opportunities for students to make, do, say, and write. Fantastic. Students need to be able to have hands-on opportunities where they are making something, they are creating something, they are able to talk about it, and they're also able to write about it. Collaborative work with peers, absolutely. Working in pairs, make sure that everybody is held accountable. And so not only having those students work in pairs, but then, like we said, with accountable talk, what did partner A tell me? So partner B has to share out, to making sure that they are collaborating and it's not just one of those students. Thank you for sharing those. We will move on to the analyze portion of the cycle. So we've planned, we have taught, and now we have to analyze the data. How will we know when they have learned it is our guiding question for analyze. So we want to examine data for the whole group and for small groups. We want to look at that data and determine trends and patterns of learning and have some justifications of those trends and patterns. We want to focus on the successes and also the struggles. And I would say when you are analyzing data, focus on a positive first. Look at that success first. When we look at data and those numbers come back and they might not look as great as we wanted them at first, there's always something good that can come out of that. So focus on success. If a student grew 5 points or 10 points or whatever may be, they have never finished a test in their entirety, and this time they did, even though the grade might not be what we wanted. Just focus on those small successes, and so that'll put us in a positive mood and a positive light. So I just want to encourage you to do that when you're analyzing data. Also want to use student work samples as some support. So when you're coming to your PLC, having that assessment with you to say, oh, this is what I noticed that student did on this math problem. This is how I realized that this student answered in this way and where they made that mistake. So having those student work samples brought with you to that data, that data PLC is going to help your colleagues help you to figure out what we can do better. Okay? And we want to identify those gaps in learning. The reason we want to ask all these questions and go through all of these things is so we can rely on our peers in our PLC, so we are working smarter and we're working together to help us figure out where we go next. So we'll head back to that Padlet real quick. And we've got some awesome things already. Thank you. So rubrics to support learning. Fantastic. So this rubric lets students know what is expected of them, but when you're grading, you can look at that rubric together as your PLC and see where they fall on that rubric. That's a fantastic way to know if our students have learned it, if they've hit all those pieces. We also have established next steps, such as what kind of feedback is needed. Feedback is so important, and when you are looking at your students' assessments, you want to offer feedback to them so they know where they can move forward, where they can go next. So establishing those next steps is fantastic, and it's going to help you close those gaps. Thank you for adding that under Analyze. And then we'll go back to our next piece in the cycle is adjust. So we've planned, we've taught, we've analyzed the data. Now what? Now what are we going to do? And the questions that guide that is, how are we going to respond if they didn't learn it? If those assessments show that they just didn't gather this material, And how will we respond when they already know it and they did a great job? So we have to adjust after we look at that data. So we want to look at other methods of delivering that information and another method of assessing. And so this is where you rely on the others in your PLC to say, what did you do? Your data looked different than mine. We were both working off the same lesson plan. What did you do differently? Or what's another way that we can deliver this content? What's another way that I can assess this? This multiple choice test didn't work well, but I feel like my kids know it. What's another way that I can assess them? So after we've looked at that data, we don't want to stop there. As somebody said, closing those gaps. What are next steps? So look at those alternative methods. We want to identify small group supports. So do I need to just pull a small group of students, or are we looking at this again, whole class? Your members of your PLC can pull resources to support that student learning, but also something that is key is to take ownership of that data and to not have, it's a safe space in your PLC, and we're working as a team for the betterment of our students. So if that data is not great, take ownership of that data and work with your team to say, hey, this wasn't great. What can I do to do better for my students? So just hold yourselves accountable for that student learning. So we'll just go to that Padlet one more time really quickly. And if you want to add anything under adjust, how can we adjust our teaching strategies? How can we adjust our assessments to respond when our students haven't learned it, or what we'll do when they have? Somebody's typing in enrichment opportunities. Absolutely. Oh, error analysis. Absolutely. That's a great one for students to go back and look and see where they made those mistakes and why they made them. And that's something that we would have to teach as in our classrooms, like how to go through and how to look at that error analysis and reteach those skills. So enrichment opportunities in small groups, remediation opportunities, going through some error analysis. Those are all great ways that we would adjust. And then as we're at the end of adjust, we're not stopping there to say that we need enrichment opportunities, but guess what? We're back at the top of the cycle and we're planning those enrichment opportunities. We are planning those remediation opportunities. So we're not done at adjust, like we have said over and over. It is that cycle, and what we've said we are going to adjust, we're back at planning. And really quickly, I know we're getting short on time, but we want to talk about how to sustain an effective PLC. So just want to bring this to your attention. Heather and I love this slide because it talked about changing our focus in our PLCs. And we've often said, every student can learn, but no, our new focus now is every student will learn. And so when we are in these PLCs, we are going to teach, we're going to plan, we're going to analyze. If our students didn't get it, we're going to adjust, and we're back at that planning session. So changing our focus to students will learn. Our focus has always been on teaching, but now it needs to be on learning. I can teach all day, but the most important is the students have learned it. Our main focus today is that we are not in isolation. We do not have to do it all on our own, but the point of a PLC, how a PLC is going to be effective, how it's going to be sustained, is if we co-labor, if we collaborate consistently and follow that learning and teaching cycle. We want to have assessments for learning rather than of learning, so that consistent, formative, quick checks. And the main thing at that bottom is failure is not an option. That's why we keep going back to that teaching and learning cycle. If we analyze our data and they didn't understand, then we go on to our adjust and then back to plan and teaching again, because failure is not an option for our students. And we want to take really quickly, if we can, to show you another tool that you can use in your classrooms called Mentimeter. And so we want to reflect really quick and have you go to that bit.ly that Jamie just put in the chat, or you can go back to our classroom and click on that reflect link, and it'll bring you up to a Mentimeter. And this is where we'd like you to enter 1 to 3 words that come to mind as you reflect on today's session, something that popped out to you, maybe some new learning or something that just you were reaffirmed in. And as you enter those words, it will come up as a word cloud, so you can see our thoughts for today. Awesome. If you've never used a word cloud before, as people are typing in, the more often a word shows up, the larger it becomes. So that makes perfect sense, and we love that. In the middle, collaboration. That's exactly what a PLC is all about, is collaboration and coming together. Ongoing is also large, so it's never ending. It is a cycle over and over and over again. It's recurring. We need to have processes in place. We need to have our norms in place. We're going to look at data. And once again, that cycle, it's never ending. We're doing all that we can over and over and over again for our students. Thank you for sharing. Right. And that is all for us today. I'll turn it back over to Jamie. Hopefully we have given you a little something that you didn't know about PLCs, and look forward to hopefully possibly working with you again.
Thank you all so much. You all are just so amazing at being able to clearly define some areas of support for our folks to be able to go back into their schools and work with other teachers in their building to help ensure that professional learning communities are truly effective in the way that they actually impact student learning. And so my takeaway from this today is to really take it back to, are we doing what's best for children, and are we spending that time in our PLCs focusing on our students that we serve? So I greatly appreciate the time that you've devoted. The collaboration between your new teacher support program and ours is something that I really appreciate. I have learned so much from the greater statewide team. And for our participants today, I'd like to also say thank you for your willingness to engage in the activities. And I hope you learned as much as I did as it relates to going back and thinking about how to impact your professional learning community with the teachers that you work closely with. So we will now have a 10-minute break. We're actually closing a little bit early in this session, so you have a few more minutes to go get yourself a little something to drink and take a little break. But you have some options for round 2 of the sessions that are available to you. And as you see on the screen, again, focusing on where your needs can be met in thinking about yourself as a leader in the classroom, leader in the school, or leader in the profession. And you have some available sessions that you can choose from in those areas. And I also want to remind you that all will be recorded. So when you get that information via your email, you will have access to any of the sessions that you were unable to attend. So at this time, I'd just like to remind you that the process for today is to have this break next, and then you will choose your second round, and then you will complete that, and you will be directed back into the main room. I also want to remind you that during the break, you are encouraged to go into Twitter if you're a Twitter user and give us some feedback about your experience at the Beginning Teacher Support Symposium, using the hashtag Brave Coaches when we are typically working together and sending information out. So you can access this at any point with our Facebook page, our Instagram page, and of course we continue to put things out on Twitter. But for today, remember, it's hashtag Learn, Grow, Lead 20. Okay, so I just want to say thank you all. You were a great audience. Thank you, ladies. You were amazing presenters. I wish I could hug you, but we're virtual. So I will send you virtual hugs, and I hope that we have the pleasure of being able to connect with you all in the future as we help to support our beginning teachers across the state. And I will close out this meeting now so you can access the website so you can determine which session you'd like to attend next.
Thank you, Jamie.